All right, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us in the 192nd Wing's first ever virtual town hall event. Interesting times call for innovation, so we're proud to have been able to bring to you live Command Chief Master Sergeant of the Air National Guard, Ron Anderson. I'm Staff Sergeant Kellyanne Ellish, and I'll be moderating the event through Zoom. For the duration of the event, my wingman, Staff Sergeant Janisa Roberts, will be scanning the comments for your questions, so be sure to leave them below. Before we begin, we'd like to extend a warm welcome to some of our senior leaders. All right, we have Virginia National Guard Command Senior Enlisted Leader, Command Chief Master Sergeant James Perfida. Virginia Air Guard State Command Chief, Chief Master Sergeant Kelly Reich. 192nd Wing Command Chief, Chief Master Sergeant Christopher Amburn.
Hey, everybody.
Please also welcome for opening remarks 192nd Wing Commander Colonel Mark Piper.
Thanks, everyone else. Appreciate it. It's all good. Appreciate it. Hey, thanks everyone for joining us today. It's going to be an awesome event here. We've got Chief Anderson as the Command Chief of the Air National Guard, so it's a great opportunity for us. Just real quick as an introduction, I think most people are probably aware that Chief Anderson started in vehicle maintenance and has done seemingly every job in the Air National Guard up to now, holding the most senior position within our entire enlisted force. I first got to know him when he was the Command Chief of the 113th Wing in the District of Columbia Air National Guard, and I got to benefit from his leadership in a lot of ways, but probably the most important one was it really started to sink in for me about how important it is to have strong enlisted leadership. And I just saw what he was able to do, the example that he set, and it really, in that way, he was one of the most important mentors that I've had in my entire career. And I know he's mentored Chief Amburn a lot and many other of us in the Virginia Air National Guard, and his leadership continues today. Even though he has now the position of the most senior enlisted member in the entire Air National Guard for all more than 106,000 of us, it hasn't gone to his head one bit. At the end of the day, what drives him, his passion is helping airmen. And we see it in what he does. He doesn't just tell people he has all the answers and just tell people what to do. He uses his position to listen. He uses his position to advocate, and he uses his position to lead. And today's just going to be an awesome opportunity for him to get with us. He wants to get out and hear what airmen have to say. So we're going to use this opportunity for him to recognize some great work from some of our banksters, to give some perspectives and comments from his perspective, as well as take your questions. So with that, Chief Anderson, on behalf of the 192nd, the Virginia Air National Guard, thanks so much for your time.
Hey, sir, it's really good to see you, and thanks for the kind words. And to all the folks who are watching, and thanks for the opportunity to engage. I see we got the State Senior Enlisted Leader, great friend of mine, Jim Perfida. It's good to see you, Chief. I know the State Command Chief, Kelly, it's good to see you as well. And of course, my good friend, Chief Amburn. But more importantly, really, this is just an opportunity for me to listen and hear what you have to say as members of our Air National Guard. One of the biggest things that I can do for our Air National Guard enlisted force is listen. And I think particularly even in these times that we have right now, listening is the best advice that I can give to every single one of us, is just to listen and to participate in conversations, because ultimately that's my job, right? Is to listen to you, hear what's important, and take it back to General Rice and the staff and really try to help make some decisions. I think before we get going, we're going to recognize some folks, if I'm not mistaken. Is that true?
Yes, sir. We're going to bring on folks here.
Awesome. Hey, so listen, before we get started with that, I would offer something to you all. And some of you may have heard me talk about this before. As we recognize some folks, I want y'all to know that is one of my favorite things to do on behalf of General Rice and the entire Air National Guard is to recognize those folks that are really setting themselves apart in some way, that something that they've done, either for our mission, for our nation, for our families, for our states and communities. And so what I'm going to do when we're done with this is next week, I'm going to get together with my team, and I'm going to make sure we get out some of the coins from General Rice and I, because we only have one coin, and it represents our entire Air National Guard. It's got his 3 stars on it, and it's got my stripes on it, because it represents all 107,700 of us. So when we recognize folks today, I really just want to make sure everybody understands that we're recognizing great work on behalf of our entire Air National Guard. And when we hand out these coins, it's really on behalf of General Rice and I both. So with that, let's take advantage of this opportunity to publicly recognize some folks.
Hello, everyone.
Here to recognize the 192nd Intel Squadron is Tech Sergeant Gosnell is being recognized by Supervisor Master Sergeant Davies. You have the floor, ma'am.
Awesome.
Sorry about that. Hey, everyone. I'm Sergeant Davies, and I just wanted to let you all know Tech Sergeant Gosnell is a cyber systems operator in the IAA flight. He distinguished himself as an outstanding performer by taking the initiative to develop and lead a volunteer mission to produce high-demand PPE for medical workers in the local community. By honing his technical skills in 3D printing, he and his team ended up providing ear savers and hands-free door openers for the wing, improving disease prevention measures. He also enhanced the domestic operations, or DOMOPS, mission by developing an airframe for unmanned aerial systems, allowing for faster radio communication relay. In addition, Tech Sergeant Gosnell presented DOMOPS capabilities to Virginia National Guard J2, increasing decision makers' awareness. Tech Sergeant Gosnell has demonstrated ideal NCO qualities through leadership, initiation, and mastering technical skills. He is quite the outstanding performer.
Awesome. Thanks, Sergeant Davis. Hey, Sergeant Gosnell, thanks for what you do, man. Hey, quick question. So are you full-time, part-time, technician, AGR?
I'm a part-timer.
Awesome. What do you do full-time?
Full-time, basically the same job for NGA.
Oh, nice. Hey, you get to leverage both sides, right? That's very cool. Hey,
Yes,
so
sir.
listen, man, thanks for what you're doing. Some of the things that we talk about, this idea of empowering airmen with innovation, it sounds like a cliche we throw around, but you're really the embodiment of that, right? Using 3D printing and things that are non-standard. It's right. That's not how we usually do business, but at the end of the day, when we need to get something done, we can depend on our airmen to find better, smarter, faster ways to do it. And you really embody that. So thanks for everything you've done. And if I was there, I'd shake your hand and do a selfie with you in front of the group, but obviously I'm not. So I want to make sure that we get you connected up. I'm going to get a coin on behalf of General Rice and I out to you, just as a very, very small token on behalf of our entire Air National Guard to say thank you for what you do every day. And thank you for being a part of our family, brother. So thanks.
Thank you, Chief. Appreciate it.
Yeah, man. Thanks, Sergeant Davis.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, recognizing Master Sergeant Self from the 192nd Security Forces Squadron is his supervisor, Senior Master Sergeant Montgomery. I'll bring them on here in just a second.
Okay.
Morning, everybody. Senior Master Sergeant Montgomery, 192nd Security Forces Squadron. I just want to introduce Master Sergeant Justin Self. Apologies, we're out in the field. We're actually on mission here in, for the civil disturbance response, but just a quick couple notes about Master Sergeant Self. He's been with our unit for 17 years, one of the cornerstones for our unit as our additional duty unit training manager. And when COVID-19 came down and we were told we couldn't do drills anymore, and General Lord said, look for other training opportunities remotely, Sergeant Self jumped into action. He used 5 digital platforms to create a 100% remote virtual drill, which enabled us to stay on track with our master training plan. And the culmination of it is here we're actually out in the field on mission right now because of Sergeant Self's efforts. Let me hand the phone over to Sergeant Self.
Awesome. Thanks, Sergeant Montgomery. Hey, Sergeant Self, man, I know we got a chance to check in a little bit earlier, brother. Hey, it's a really, you are really the embodiment of a ready airman, right? Getting into the training, kind of figuring out how to work this thing out. Because at the end of the day, who in a million years would have thought that we would have needed you out in our communities to respond to taking care of our folks that are, our neighbors in our communities. Who'd have thought in a million years that you'd have had to figure this out? Just go do it, and look what happened, man. You and your team are out there. You're ready to fight. You're ready to protect the neighbors, and you're ready to do the mission either overseas or in our community. So thanks so much for what you do and really being the face of our National Guard out there, because I know it can't be easy. I know being on those streets with your neighbors and your friends and in the midst of this can't be easy. So thanks for everything you're doing, brother. I appreciate it.
Absolutely, sir. We're actually very honored to be here, and it actually is great for our team. We're not only building our skills, we're also building our camaraderie. Oftentimes we're deployed, we're separated. We're here as one team, one fight, and we are living the actual dream here. It may not be the best conditions, but we are getting to know our airmen from top to bottom, and we're definitely getting to make sure we are honing in on our skills that we need to actually continue the fight, both stateside and overseas as well. Sir.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head, right? Because on one hand, we expect you particularly as a defender to go down range and take the fight to the enemy and keep the wolves at bay. And then in a moment's notice, we ask you to go downtown and be the face of everything that is good in our nation, right? The embodiment of allowing folks to peaceably assemble and express, what's important to them, and protect life and limb at the same time, but be the very face of everything that's good in our nation. And the fact that you're able to do that and lead a team is incredibly important to General Rice and I both. So as I said earlier, I'm going to make sure that you get a coin on behalf of General Rice and I, just as a small token of our appreciation for everything that you're doing, brother. Thanks again.
Thank you, Chief. I really appreciate it.
All right. Stay safe, man.
Yes, sir.
Thanks. I like the facial mask that was going on there. That was nice. Little wrestling. I clearly was ill prepared. I should have had some good jokes lined up. Sergeant Willard, you look nervous. Okay. Hey, why we're waiting. This is the first time we've ever done this, right? So we expected there to be a little bit of glitches, and it's all good because it's real time, and this is kind of pushing the envelope. So how are you?
I'm doing wonderful. Thank you for asking.
Awesome. All right. So we're gonna recognize somebody, or are we recognizing you?
We're recognizing me.
Outstanding. So are you gonna tell me about you, or do we have somebody coming in?
Senior Gilligan will be introducing my awesome self. So
I love it. I love it.
It looks like Sergeant Gilligan is having some technical issues, so we will put a pause on this recognition until we can get Sergeant Gilligan back on. Sergeant Willard, if you don't mind, I will just put your video on pause and we'll bring you back up as soon as we can get her back on, okay?
sounds like a plan, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we'll talk to you in a little bit.
Okay, so we're going to have from the 192nd Medical Group is Master Sergeant Joyle to recognize Master Sergeant Crenshaw.
Sergeant Joyle, how you doing, man? There we go.
Sorry, this whole social media type thing. I apologize for that. But yeah, it's my pleasure to introduce Master Sergeant Crenshaw, who's the full-time Detachment 1 administrative NCO. So she's had to play this balancing game over the last a couple weeks and months, and not only having to maintain her proficiency and her roles and responsibilities with her full-time job, but because of this whole COVID-19 response that our detachment has been heavily involved with since the beginning of April, she's now having to make sure that she maintains that sustainment package for 40 plus airmen that are continuing to operate on orders today as well. So when you think about that sustainment package, you're thinking about all the orders and all the DTS, all the lodging and stuff like that that needs to be maintained. And oh, by the way, because the fog of this COVID war is the level that it's at, all these orders and DTS need continual amendments and so on. So it's literally a more than a full-time job for Sergeant Crenshaw to maintain this kind of thing. She's also developing a demobilization package in conjunction with some wing folks and medical group folks and JOC folks as well on the Joint Force Headquarters side, to make sure that these folks, when they're ready to come off orders, that they're doing it correctly, and their pay is still there, and their benefits are being taken care of, and their leave is going to be taken care of. She's doing an outstanding job, and there's just no way that we would be able to get through this without her. Though she's not directly responsible or directly related to any of the COVID missions that are going out on day to day, we as airmen that are working these processes out there in the field wouldn't be able to get this stuff done without Sergeant Crenshaw behind the scenes taking the lead on this kind of thing. So I, as the NCOIC for the full-time depth staff, I am super happy that she's with our program. So this is great that she's being recognized this way, Chief. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Hey, thanks very much. And Sergeant Crenshaw, hey, listen, as a guy that went from being a maintainer for my entire career over to the FSS superintendent at the DC Guard, I don't think you really understand what it takes to get folks ready and to actually send them out the door in terms of medical and admin and orders and all of that stuff. And then, oh, by the way, you have to take care of them while they're out there, and then be able to bring them back and make sure that their records and everything else, and they get paid and their families are taken care of. People just don't understand it unless you've been doing it. And I understand, and from the bottom of my heart, and from every family member out there that's the beneficiary of the good work you're doing, thank you. Because when we talk about taking care of airmen, that's exactly what we're talking about. Because it's relatively easy to be the person that's deployed, whether it's in the community or downrange, right? It's Groundhog Day, you go do your job, what you're trained to do. But those of us who are at home managing that and setting them up for success and then taking care of them on the backside is a huge lift. So thank you so much for taking care of those folks. I appreciate it more than you know.
Chief, it's my pleasure. Like Sergeant Joe said, our members are out there and they're fighting the COVID fight every day. They work countless hours, and the last thing I want them to worry about is their pay, are their benefits, is their lodging, and their government travel card. So I do everything I can to make sure they can continue to fight the fight without wondering behind the scenes, is their pay going to continue? So it is my.
Yeah, you're exactly right, because at the end of the day, if they're going to go into harm's way, we have to have them focused, and to know that you're there for them is incredibly important, again, to General Rice and I both, and really to every member of our Guard and all of our families. So thanks very much. And as I told the other folks, I'll make sure you get a coin from General Rice and I, and just know that it's just a very, very small token of our appreciation for what you're doing for those folks out there every single day. It's great to meet you, and thanks for everything you do every day, and thanks for being a part of our family.
Same, Chief. Thank you.
All right, take care. You both have a good day. Thanks, Sergeant.
Well.
Appreciate it, man.
All right, we do have Senior Master Sergeant Gilligan here to recognize Staff Sergeant Willard from the 192nd Maintenance Squadron.
Hey, Sergeant Gilligan.
Hey, good afternoon, Chief. So I'd like to introduce Staff Sergeant John Cole Willard. She's a munition systems craftsman in the 192nd Maintenance Squadron here at Langley. Quite honestly and simply, she's the mama bear of our flight. She does everything in between. She's our animal morale team president. She's our lead sponsor. She coordinates morale packages and wellness packages to those deployed. She aids and assists and liaises our inbound sponsorship program to our new recruits. But most notably, she's our unit career advisor. And so she's mentoring all of our troops from the lowest airman to the most senior enlisted advisor to the squadron commander in the group. Those efforts, she standardized the program not only at the flight level, in the squadron and the group level, to the point where she's been recently recognized as the National Guard Bureau UCA of the Year for 2019.
Awesome. Wow. It's good to see you again there, Sergeant Willard. But hey, so listen, thanks for all those things you do. You know, all of those things are incredibly important. But one of those, the last things we talked about, right, the career advisor part, in the world I live in, right, we live and die by the numbers. And when I go to Capitol Hill, the credibility I get when we have a recruiting and retention rate that's high is meaningful to our members on the Hill, and because they give us money depending on our numbers. So I think if more folks would have that interaction very deliberately like you do, I think that would really have a positive effect throughout our 54. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask your wing command chief maybe to sit down with you and maybe share some of the successes that you've had in terms of building those relationships and really positive effect on readiness and because of that retention. And let's get that into EFAC. So I know Chief Amber, you're listening. So let's get her tied into EFAC and see what kind of lessons we can learn from this, because clearly you're making a difference. You're having an effect on the leadership at the 192nd and a very positive effect on the organization as a whole. So thanks for what you're doing. And we're not done with you yet. We're going to get more out of you at the national level.
I'm here. Absolutely. I'm 100% game for it.
Perfect. Well, I appreciate it. And as I've told those other folks, I'll make sure you get a coin. If we can get you up to DC fast enough to spend some time up there, maybe I'll be able to give it to you in person at the Readiness Center. And Chief Amber and I are great friends, so we'll be able to figure out how to make that one work. And I've got a little bit of time left, so maybe we'll be able to, like I said, do that in person. But for all those things you do, in addition to preparing for the, getting those jets where they need to be for the downrange fight, thank you. Thank you on my, from the bottom of my heart, and certainly from General Rice and I both. We'll get a coin to you as a small token of our appreciation.
Thank you, sir. And I really want to say thank you to Master Sergeant Hopkins and Senior Gilligan for giving me the ability to take on that program, and really they empowered me to make it my own. So I really can't say that. And my husband, Master Sergeant
well played, sir.
Willard. He's in the background. I apologize. Thank you so much to everybody.
Well, got to give another camera. Where's he at? Put him on the camera.
All right, come on over. He always steals my limelight.
Hi, Chief. How you doing?
I'm good. Hey, thanks for taking such good care of her. Thanks for putting her in a position of to feel completely empowered to do these kinds of things.
Appreciate it, Chief. I'm the home front warrior out here. Glad to do what I do.
I love it. All
hey,
right.
Anderson, just one quick note on the Willards there. Both of them were just recently promoted within like the last week. And then Sergeant Willard just became a first sergeant for the 192nd Wing. So Team Willard's rocking it out.
Thank you,
Very
Chief.
cool. Hey, thanks to both of you. And, we talk about this Air National Guard being a team sport, really, and it's a family sport. And there we go. The example of what that means. So thanks to you both. And thanks for being a part of our family.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, you have a great day.
All right. Thank you, Team Willards.
Yeah, Team Willard. Love it. New call signs.
All right, Chief. We have Chief Master Sergeant Ivy and Airman Basic Caulfield, who is the newest member of the 192nd Med Group's Detachment 1.
Awesome. There.
All right, I'm going to introduce them in just a moment.
Okay. Chief, how are you today?
So these two folks, they are part of a 42-member team who have been on the front lines of the COVID-19 pandemic, having performed more than 17,000 tests for the disease at point prevalence testing sites, including 27 long-term care facilities, 7 state correctional facilities, 20 communities, and a meat packing plant in Smithfield, Virginia.
Wow.
The team has also completed more than 2,000 N95 mask fit tests for medical and long-term facility staff.
Absolutely incredible. Absolutely incredible. This is really the epitome of who we are, right? We've got an Airman Basic, E1, and an E9 together out there in the field. So Airman Caulfield, my guess is that you went to basic training, but not tech school. Is that true?
I've actually been to both.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Went all the way through a basic training, all the way through phase 3, and then came home.
Okay. So when did you join the Air National Guard?
I enlisted November 6th of 2018, I believe.
Okay. Awesome. So you're this is a whole new thing, not only from a guard perspective, but also from a, hey, congratulations, you're going to head out there and you're going to do a real world mission.
It has been very, very interesting, but an amazing opportunity.
Awesome.
I've enjoyed it.
Well, I appreciate that. And Chief, I know successful airmen have great leadership, so you very clearly are setting the path for her, and thanks for that, brother. I appreciate it. So question for you both. Chief, first and foremost, full-time, part-time, technician, AGR, what about you?
Well, Chief, I'm part-time, I'm DSG, and ironically, I've been aviation. So I was never part of the medical field, and so when I made Chief, I transferred on over to the Det 1.
Okay.
And so that was definitely a big change for me. It's a terrific group of people, and quite frankly, it's a privilege to be part of that group. These folks, you think about Air Force core values, they definitely put everybody else before them. And one of the things I've noticed since day one, since I actually went there, was they were always thinking about the other person. And the shining example is this COVID experience. Every last one of them left the safety of their home to become the pointy end of the spear to be out there, with potentially, for example, the nursing homes and everything else, the risk of being infected with the COVID virus. So yeah, my hat's off to all these folks. They're all great team players. The camaraderie of the entire Det 1 group has been outstanding. So it's a privilege to be part of that.
Yeah, very cool. Thanks, Chief. And so Airman Cofield, so what's the aspiration, right? So, still kind of getting into this. What are you going to do now that you're part of the Guard? Are you going to go to school, get a full-time job? How's this going to work for you?
I do want to go to school one day. I have a full-time job at home. I'm an ER tech.
Oh, no. Oh, so it makes perfect sense. All right.
Yes.
All right. So we need to get you off to school, go through medical school, become a doctor, and then, you could become a flight doc, whatever, maybe wing commander sometime.
That'd be fun.
Yeah, that'd be good. All right. Hey, it's great to meet you both. And really, so thanks for what you're doing. Thanks for being out there on the front lines and really stepping into this. Like Chief said, one day you're at home, everything's good. And the next day you're out there putting yourselves in harm's way in a way that's much different than being, say, in Afghanistan or Iraq or one of those, because I think we understand how that works. Nobody understood how COVID was going to work, right? And you all just jumped out there and said, you know what, we got it. And you really are the epitome of what it means to be a ready airman again, as we've talked about. So on behalf of General Rice and I want to make sure that two of you both get a coin on behalf of the entire organization that's out there. So please share this thank you with the rest of your teammates. And I appreciate what you do every single day. You put yourselves in harm's way to protect others. And there's nothing better than that right there in terms of an Air National Guard member. So it's good to meet you both. Thanks for what you do, and take care of yourselves and stay safe.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Chief.
All right. Take care, y'all.
Hey, Chief, that wraps up our recognition. So the floor is yours.
Awesome. Well, thanks very much. And, had an opportunity to talk about a lot of things that were incredibly important to me as the Air National Guard Command Chief as we met and got a chance to recognize some of these folks. So there's really not much left to say, except to say thank you. And I want to give you some stats just so you kind of all understand the gravity of what we're going through right now. As of 9 o'clock this morning, Zulu, we had 19,699 airmen across our Air National Guard and across all the components, or excuse me, all the COCOMs engaged. That's almost 20,000 of our Air National Guard members out in some way, form, or fashion engaged in a mission, and whether that was COVID, domestic response, downrange fight, ACA missions, all those things, 20,000 on status today. Total from the National Guard perspective, so that's including our soldiers as well as our airmen, 120,000 plus. That's an incredible number, when you think about when you add in those domestic responses and COVID and the rest of that's not normal business for us. And what I would offer to you is that our nation depends on us in so many ways. And I will tell you that our nation didn't understand the importance of the National Guard until a couple of months ago, really, until COVID hit. And then certainly in what our men and women are able to do in their communities right now. So on behalf of General Rice and I and every member out there in your community and every member that stands with you in uniform, thank you for what you do every day. Thank you for being willing at a moment's notice whether it's to support an an F-22 and send those airplanes downrange on a moment's notice, or it's to pack your bags and go sleep on a floor in an armory and wake up the following morning and to protect an asset, or to stand with your brothers and sisters and just make sure nobody gets hurt while they peacefully protest. Never in a million years had you asked me 6 months ago, would we be here today? But there was never a doubt in my mind that you would perform anything other than absolutely outstanding, which is what you've done. So thank you on behalf of General Rice and I both. I want to do a quick shout out to Colonel Piper. I know he said a few things at the beginning, and I will tell you that he and I do have a history together, and it's an extremely great relationship that he and I have had. We had some great talks at the 113th, and certainly as he went to work at the Pentagon and did some things there. And he's an absolute brilliant leader, and he's the right guy for the 192nd right now. So Colonel Piper, thanks for your opportunity to be here. And of course, the shout out to the 3 command chiefs, your state senior enlisted leader, your state command chief, and then certainly your wing command chief, all great friends of mine, folks that I've known for years. And so I offer that to you in terms of your leadership right now. I know their hearts. I know what's important to them. And I know for a fact that they want to do nothing more than empower you to be successful. And that is exactly how General Rice and I see the world. My job and his job is to give you and your leadership the tools that you need to be successful. And the great news is every airman that I have ever met, whether they were from the Virginia Air National Guard or they were from pick another state or another wing, is absolutely doing above and beyond anything that I could possibly ask. And that's because of great leadership, as I just talked about. I know we don't have a whole lot of time right now, and I could talk about some of the great accomplishments that you've done in the Virginia Air National Guard. I could talk about it for a very long time, but I do know you have some questions. So I want to go ahead and go over and offer up the opportunity, because I know you have some questions that you want to talk about, because that is a large part of my job on behalf of General Rice, as I said earlier, is to hear from you and what's important and take that back to our leadership so that we can make decisions about the future for the Virginia Air National Guard and make sure we get it right. So you have what you need for the future, so that when your kids, your grandkids want to be a part of the Virginia Air National Guard, that there's a unit there that's still involved in the fight every day. So help me with that. And one of the ways that we can do that is by getting feedback from you. So let's shift over to questions. But before they do that, I want to do a shout out to my very good friend Jim Profita, just so in case y'all didn't know. He's officially incredibly old. Today is his 50th birthday. So Jim Profita, Chief Profita, happy birthday, brother. And thanks for everything you do for our nation. He was the functional manager for the first sergeants for the entire National Guard not too long ago. And he and I got to spend an awful lot of time together. And Jim, thanks for everything you've done for our nation, for our airmen, both in terms of civilian law enforcement and your military career. I appreciate it, and happy birthday to you. So let's shift over and go to some questions and see what's going on out there. And I'll do my best to offer you up my perspective. And I'll tell you if it's my opinion, I'll tell you that. And if it's based on fact, I will tell you that as well. And if I don't know the answer, I'll be honest with you and I'll tell you. My promise to you is I've got an incredible staff that's listening in right now. Senior Master Sergeant Holcomb and Master Sergeant Brittany Ingram, both part of my team. And they're out there helping me. We'll get the questions, and then I'll make sure I get those answers back to your leadership team, so you can get an answer as quickly as possible if I don't know the answer. So, all right, let's shift over and see what's on your minds today.
All right, thank you, Chief. So we have a few questions from the audience. This question comes from some of our folks that we previously gathered. Question 1 is: as we continue to compete for seats in formal training courses, how do you see wait times for guardsmen panning out in the future amid COVID-19?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, right? And I got to shift the focus away from that specific question and go to a more strategic view first. And let me offer to you, COVID is an interesting discussion in that it has forced us as an organization, as an Air Force and as an Air National Guard, to really reflect on what does it mean to educate, train, and to develop an airman. And there used to be this idea, certainly was when I grew up in the active component for the first 12 years of my life, first 12 years of my career, that you had to do in residence, that there was no other way. But what's very interesting is I didn't go to tech school when I joined the Air Force. I had done auto body as a young man in my stepfather's shop. At 10 years old, I was sweeping the floors. By the time I was 15 or 16, I was painting cars and restoring old hot rods. When I joined the Air Force, I was pretty proficient in my job, and I took a bypass test and I went straight to Germany and got my 3 level as soon as I hit the ground. And I went into 5-level upgrade training as an airman basic with 0 time under my belt. We can get back to that kind of thing, particularly in the Air National Guard, because of the skill sets that we bring. What I'm after right now is, yes, in residence experience, whether it's PME or tech schools or any of those, in residence experience is extremely valuable, but there are other ways to achieve that same level of competency. And I think we're learning some valuable lessons. I mean, look at what we're doing today. This COVID discussion has really forced us to take a hard look at what does it mean to educate, train, and develop an airman. We recognize that we stood down for a couple of months now, all in residence PME. We stood down some tech schools. We took a significant hit in the number of airmen that we were sending through basic training. So the Air Force at large had to stand down these things while we kind of reevaluated. What the future is in terms of that is where we're going to get right back up to as soon as we possibly can with basic training in tech school. But there is no mistake the fact that we are behind the power curve. Well, how do we get ahead of it? I think we have to exploit every opportunity or every learned opportunity that we've got through this COVID discussion. I will tell you that successfully, we've done some tests. We did a beta test for the NCOA very recently, and we changed the way we do what we consider in residence and a blended learning kind of environment. And I think some of you went through that beta test, and the feedback I've been getting was it was extremely valuable in a way that none of the other courses have been. And the great part about it is that course is available because the Air National Guard pushed the Air Force to change the way they do business. It's not just the Air National Guard and the Air Force Reserve that are getting into these blended learning constructs. The Air Force at large is part of that now. And again, it's because of the successes that folks like Steve Durant's, who's our commandant out at the TEC, and McGee Tyson's been able to do. So again, I think that's a great question to ask. I would open up the aperture even wider and suggest, well, how can we change the way we educate, train, and develop airmen and exploit really some of these new technologies, or really probably I would say existing technologies that we were just afraid of getting into. I'm excited about the future, and I think this will force us to change and to evolve and be better than we ever have in terms of developing an airman. So thanks very much for that question.
Thank you, sir. Okay, and we also have the OCP transition is getting closer and closer, but a lot of the VANG are still waiting for their first pair to be issued. Could the required by date possibly be changed for the Air National Guard?
Yeah, and that's an interesting question we're having, and there's been a little bit of that talk. I will tell you, first and foremost, I sit in every 2 weeks. We do a virtual call just like this with all the MAJCOM command chiefs, as well as the Chief Master Sergeant of the Air Force and our senior enlisted leader from the Space Force, and we talk about some of these questions. The AFMC, the Material Command Command Chief, got on the line and made it very clear to everybody, because we've all had this question. There is no shortage of supply from the Air Force perspective when it comes to OCPs. Now, have we gotten them out to the field at the Air National Guard level? Not yet. And I recognize that we've got to do better at that. But we also have to remember that we've got some time, right? We don't have quite a year, but we've got, 8 or 10 months until it's a full up wear policy. So I believe that we'll be able to make it happen if we don't push the date. But I would also tell you that we're waiting to see if the Air Force at large decides to push it down the path a little bit to the right. And here's why. We would only push the date, not because, as I told you earlier, that maybe we don't have enough uniforms. The truth of the matter is we have enough uniforms. But what we want to do is we want to take pressure off of the staff to allow them to focus on things like COVID response and maybe getting enough masks out or enough protective equipment in terms of responding to COVID. And when our staff is focused on kind of the churn with uniforms, they're not doing the thing that we need them most to do right now. So if we do opt to push this thing to the right, it's not because we don't have enough uniforms, it's because we need the staff focused on empowering our airmen to be out in the field today. So I would tell you to stand by. And my promise to all of you is through your command chiefs, if I get any information, I will push it out as quickly as possible. As a side note, I'll let you in on a couple of things that are coming very soon. Something that we've been advocating, I personally and one of my fellow command chiefs have been advocating personally for years, is the Chief of Staff of the Air Force just signed a policy letter. Well, for this one, you can cuff your OCPs, but more importantly, that our women who when they do wear their mess dress no longer are mandated to wear the skirt. You'll see that guidance come out very soon. And I think that's an important discussion. Not only can our women who are wearing mess dress wear the men's pants, which by the way aren't made for women. We're in the process of creating the right pants for women that are in our Air Force. So I think that's a huge win. There's a couple of the rest of them that are going to come out, but those are two big ones. The cuffing thing, we did it anyway, whether it was right or wrong, but I think that's an okay thing. But more importantly is we recognize the fact that, I don't know who decided that women had to wear a dress and mess dress. That was ridiculous to begin with. So we fixed that one. But again, I think part of this is really about, letting the staff focus on what's important, and that's COVID response and some of the getting our airmen downrange from a bigger picture. So again, thanks for that question.
Thank you, Chief. Appreciate the detailed response there.
Yep.
Okay, we have another question here. When will we see a guard unit in the Space Force?
That's a great question. I will tell you that we are in space right now. In other words, we have airmen in the space mission right now. And we have a multitude of our wings that are already doing it. And we've projected out like Hawaii and Guam and some of these other folks. That's not going to change, right? We're going to be enablers in the Space Force because that's just who we are. And we're a part of that discussion. I can't tell you today with any assurance or any kind of data or date that says, hey, on this date, they will become part of the Space National Guard. I can tell you this. This past week that just passed, General Rice was part of Corona, and Corona is all the MAGCOM commanders and the Chief of Staff and the Secretary of the Air Force and our Chief Master on the Air Force get together a couple times a year, and they call it Corona, and they have hard discussions and hard decision making. And one of the conversations was with our Space Force folks about what is the National Guard equity, not the Air National Guard, but what are the National Guard equities in space? And that's a question that we're wrestling with. Congress has to tell us it's the right thing. And then the Air Force, Space Force, and the National Guard have to agree on how do we do that? Do one day we just rip this off and put Space Force? Or do they remain a part of the Air National Guard and our force providers to Space Force? It's a little bit of an identity discussion right now, more as soon as those decisions are made. But from a bigger picture, right now, today, we have Air National Guard airmen who are involved in the warfight in space. And I use that warfight in space very deliberately, because if you didn't recognize this, we are at war in space. It's not an outright, conventional war, but no kidding, we are at war in space, and we need folks out there actively protecting our assets every day. So good question, more to come on that. If I were a younger airman, I'd be all in and all over that Space Force, because I think it's a pretty cool discussion right now.
I'd have to agree with you there, Chief.
Well, there's still time, so I may be calling you up and asking you one day if you want to join the Space Force or the Space National Guard. So be careful what you ask for.
All right, next question we have is, are there any changes on the horizon between the ANG and ACC staff regarding MPA, ADOS, and STAT opportunities?
Yeah, can you read it to me again? I got distracted, I'm sorry.
That's okay. Are there any changes on the horizon between the ANG and ACC staff regarding MPA, ADOS, or STAT opportunities?
Yeah, I will tell you yes, but not specifically for ACC. And really what I mean by that is I don't focus so much on specifically MAGCOMs. That's really not my job. My job is the entire Air National Guard and as force providers to the COCOMs through ACC or AMC, whatever. So not specific to ACC, while notwithstanding that that's a huge part of what we do. I am interested in expanding our enlisted, in particular, our enlisted equities within the MAGCOMs. And what I mean by that is there are decisions that are made every day in ACC, for example, that we're not a part of. And it's not because the ACC staff doesn't want us or has locked us out. It's just, quite honestly, we don't have somebody in the room during these discussions. How great would it be to have a senior NCO in the room with the ACC commander and ACC command chief having a discussion about the future of cyber, and have one of our airmen in that room adding value to that discussion. And that's one of the things that I'm deeply, deeply interested in doing, is expanding our influence. So what I have done is I've created, with the help of the staff, I've created traditional positions. In other words, what I'm going to do is take a small pot of days and dollars, and I'm going to hand it to each one of the MAGCOMs. And then we're going to hire a drill status guardsman to go out to those MAGCOMs, and we're going to call them MAGCOM commander, MAGCOM command chief. I can't remember what we called them, like their help essentially. So we're going to take a chief and put that person in there with the MAJCOM command chiefs, and they're going to have access to help that command chief make decisions every day. And they're going to get a pot of days and dollars with some travel money, about 90 days total per year. But that's going to enable them to be a part of those discussions. So that is one thing that we're doing. MPA is really the MAJCOM has to do that. But from the parts that we own, I'm looking to expand our influence. And certainly my hope is that the individual that replaces me, whoever number 13 is, carries that, because I think it's an important discussion. So I can't give you specifics in terms of are there expanded things beyond the one that I'm talking about. But my hope is that in the future we do create some of these positions so that we can again expand our influence at the MAJCOMs. So thanks.
Thank you, Chief. All right, another question we have is there any feedback from the Resiliency Tactical Pause conducted last year that you can share, such as common themes, a way forward, effectiveness?
Yeah, that's a great discussion, right? And I would first say that I think there were some lessons learned from when we did the resiliency stand down that we can apply in today's environment. You know, this is something that we really didn't talk about, and I didn't address at the beginning, but it is of everybody that's out there listening right now knows that we're in an interesting place and in a hard place in our society. And our airmen, you know, as we talked, we've got defenders who are standing out on the streets with their neighbors, the folks they went to high school with, and they're in the middle of this sociological discussion about, you know, where do we stand and what do we want to be and how do we make ourselves better as a nation and eliminate this hatred that is in some of these folks. And I don't know the answer, but I do believe that a conversation can be the beginning of change. And we learned some things during the resiliency discussion, right? Particularly as related to suicide and some mental health. But I think those lessons can be applied in this discussion, the small group discussions, the open facilitated discussions, and maybe we can take some of that and put it into our wings and into our groups. One of the things that we did learn is that you don't need a 5,000-mile screwdriver from DC into your wing to tell you how to do business. We learned that every wing and every squadron, every group is different, and there is no one size fits all because every environment is different. What you face here in Richmond, for instance, is significantly different than what's going on in Minnesota right now. And so for me to put a policy out that says this is how you will address this doesn't work. And what we're trying to get to is where we empower commanders, wing commanders and wing command chiefs to be able to facilitate discussions in the way that's meaningful to them. And that's one of the biggest things we learned. But for me personally, there were a couple things that are no surprise to anybody. Our airmen, they want to have conversations with leadership. Our airmen want to know they matter. Our airmen want to know they're being heard. Our airmen want to know that they're a part of something bigger than themselves. And while that sounds obvious, it clearly isn't true of all of our airmen. And there are some lessons that we can learn on how we can do a better job of including all of our airmen, whether you're an airman basic, you know, at a detachment, or you're a chief who's the wing command chief. Every airman in our organization needs to understand that they are valued and they are part of this family. And we've got to do better at that. And we've got to learn some lessons with each other. So those are some interesting things that you would think are common sense, but the very fact that some of our airmen felt like they had to express it told us that we have work to do. So again, I did ask the staff in particular in prep for this conversation, and I was told that the staff is working to go on to resiliency number 2, and that's just my words, not theirs, and how we might do this again based on some lessons learned. So I would tell you to stand by. I can't tell you when it's going to happen, but here's the last thing I would say about it is, you don't need the Air National Guard Readiness Center commander or the director of the Air National Guard, certainly the Air National Guard command chief, to tell you to have a resiliency day, or to have you have a day where you're going to have small group discussions and you're going to talk about racism or bias or any of those things. You can do that right now. You can do that in your squadrons, in your shops, in your groups. Somebody out there, a tech sergeant right now wants to do that, and that tech sergeant can stand up and should feel empowered on behalf of the commander to do it, to say, you know what, we need to take a half an hour, 2 days, however long it takes, and to have a different conversation. And I want every airman out there that's listening to understand that you are valued and a part of this organization. And if any one of you feels like you're not valued, you're not part of this, then we're doing it wrong and we have work to do. And my promise to you, as long as I'm in this uniform, is that I'm going to help push and facilitate this conversation and make tomorrow better for everybody. So good conversation, but there is certainly more to do. So thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Completely agree there. And, hope we can make this whole Air National Guard a better place for every single airman.
Absolutely. So when you're the command chief of the Air National Guard, you will feel empowered and to be able to look back and realize that it's a better place than it was when you were a young staff sergeant, when you're the command chief.
Yes, sir. All right, we have another question here for you. What are some Air National Guard level takeaways from watching the forced transition to remote work within the past few months? What are the benefits and or consequences that you've seen?
Yeah, we talked a little bit about this in terms of education, training, and development. And, I'll be the first to tell you, given an option, I would rather be standing in one of your shops out there, Langley, out at your headquarters or out on the street with your guardsmen and your defenders, face to face, having this conversation, because there is no experience like just sitting down and breaking bread or having a cup of coffee with an airman and talking about what's important to them. But we also have an extremely valuable opportunity here, and that's for all of us to capture some of the lessons learned and some of the successes that we've had. Something as simple as this platform that we're using right now. I mean, who in a million years would have thought that this would have been all of a sudden the way we do business? I will tell you, my office, the Air National Guard Command Chief office, this is what we use every day, and it won't stop. If tomorrow we decide to go full back up into the office at the Pentagon, it won't stop. The great part about this platform, I can do it on my personal phone. I'm using my personal laptop right now just because it has a better camera. I think the question really is to all of you is, and I ask you to consider, what lessons have you learned? How has things, have you benefited from this? And then, where are those pitfalls? Where are we falling into traps that we might need to look out for and really write those down? And I am not the one, I'm not going to be arbitrary, the arbiter of what's right and wrong and positives and negatives on this. I have my opinions about it, but really when we talk about execution of the mission, it's happening at the wing level, not at the Pentagon. And you're going to have to tell us, what you need, what were the benefits of this, and how can we invest more in some of that technology? And then how do we mitigate some of the things that didn't work so well? So I really look to feedback from all of you, because again, it goes to that 5,000 mile screwdriver. Just because I think A and B were benefits and C was not, doesn't mean you feel the same way. And what you don't want is me telling you how you're going to do business in the future if it's not useful for you, particularly in the environment that you guys deal with, being an active duty and a guard mission so woven so tightly. You're going to be different than Guard Base USA out in, say, Wyoming. So good question, but more to come on that. And I look for feedback from you guys on that one.
Thank you, Chief. All right, we have another question here. Let's see. So I know you touched on the beta test for the NCOA already, but with that complete and the rollout of the new distance course to follow, it shows enlisted PME is pretty much evolving and moving into the 21st century. Yeah. What do you see as the next big changes for PME in the future?
Yeah, I'm excited about it. I had a conversation about a year ago with the new commander down at McGee Tyson down there at the TEC, the Training and Education Center. And and he and I have a great history together. Used to be the commander, used to be in charge of diversity for the Air National Guard, and now he's the commander down there. And I expressed to him, and I shared with him an idea that came out of an active duty wing. It's actually right here on Andrews. They have the 89th wing. It's the airlift wing. They do the presidential airlift and all that. And I happen to be very good friends with the command chief of the 89th. And he shared with me and took me out to one of his squadrons, and they were doing something because they're such a transient organization, because they're doing presidential airlift. You can have a supervisor who's working, from, Andrews, and all of his airmen are off flying missions or on crew rest, and they're never in the same place twice. So what they did is they created an online environment in which they communicate, they trade thoughts and ideas, and they chat. And there's some really good ideas that came out of this. So I had the conversation with the folks out at the TEC, and I offered that we might want to create something like that for our airmen that can be used on a cell phone, personal laptop, government laptop. We're not constrained by our CAC cards, and it will be what we consider to be an umbrella in which we tuck up development, not a singular program, right? And I think that's where we tend to get hung up. Let's rewrite PME and make a singular program. That's not what I'm after. I'm after an agile, a developing program that is ever changing and always moving and developing and taking advantage of what's next in technology. So consequently, they felt empowered down there, and they just rolled out what we call the Training and Education Center University, TECU. What I asked them to do was to beta test TECU. And then ultimately, the goal is once they get a handle on it and they learn that, hey, this is the good parts, this is the bad parts, and start to exploit some of its capability, we're going to exploit that, we're going to expand that into the Air National Guard, and we're going to make it ANGU for Air National Guard University. And again, ANGU is not a singular program. It's not an app. It's an environment in which you can tuck up everything. And the great part about it is it measures engagement. So for instance, if I happen to work for Chief Amburn and I'm one of his airmen, the supervisor, the command chief, whoever is a Chief Amburn supervisor, can measure engagement because of this umbrella that this thing is under. How many times we chat, like for instance, if he sends me, hey, check out this link, it's to a TED Talk, and let's talk about it afterwards, because that's also development. It measures and captures engagement in terms of, hey, how long did Airman Anderson spend doing his CDCs, which, oh, by the way, we tucked up underneath that same umbrella. So what you end up with is an umbrella in which everything gets tucked up, and then you have an overarching program that manages it or creates an environment. I'm really excited about it, and the best part about it is it's platform agnostic. In other words, you can tuck up under, whether you work on an Apple, a Droid, PC, it doesn't matter. And it measures engagement, and it facilitates an environment of engagement. So I think we're just on the very, very tip of what this can offer us. My hope is that we get this moving a little faster and I can get some more money into it, because again, I'm on terminal leave according to what was supposed to happen. But again, COVID, I get to stay a few more months, and I'm going to keep pressure on this as long as I'm in this job, because I'm excited about the future. So I offer that to you in terms of capability for the future, but ultimately our airmen need to tell us, what is training, what is education, what does development mean to them, and how do they want to be presented this information. Again, old school guy, you're talking to somebody that said, hey, in residence PME is the only way to do business because it works for me. But that's not how it works for everybody. So we need to continue to evolve and adapt. And that's not how we're a bureaucracy, and the machine works slow, and we have to go faster. So I'm excited about it, but there's more coming.
Thank you, Chief. We have a question here from Facebook. It is, does the Air National Guard recognize the low retention rates for its service? If so, how does it plan to keep members and change morale?
Yeah, that's interesting perspective. I will tell you, as the Air National Guard Command Chief, I spend an inordinate number of hours and days and a lot of my time looking at number and data. And I would tell you, from where I sit, that's not really true. Our retention rates aren't low. Our recruiting rates aren't low. Matter of fact, last year we were the only service to meet end strength, and that wasn't because of our recruiting effort. Not solely. I mean, we've got great recruiters. As a prior recruiter, I take pride in that. But our retention rate is significantly high. It really, really is. And it continues to be really high. It's higher than the reserves, and it's higher than our active component. So I would argue that it may feel like that locally, and sometimes it does, right? Because there are career fields, there are shops, there are platforms in which it's extremely hard to retain people. For instance, here in the DC area, as a DC guardsman, I couldn't keep folks in comm. We would send them off to school. They'd come out of tech school, and we'd give them a technician job. And a year later, they had enough experience that they were going downtown to work for a 3-digit agency and leaving just like that, because they could get a GS-13 job, and I could only give them a GS-9. And I don't fault them for that. They're just trying to take care of their families. So how do we make sure we understand in the aggregate, right, where our numbers really are truly at, but also understand that maybe at the 192nd, maybe Colonel Piper's got some areas that he needs to focus on. So when you take a look at that secondary idea that wing commanders may be struggling to retain certain AFSCs or certain shops, what General Rice and I have worked on for the last 4 years, and actually last year, we gave commanders the opportunity and the ability to take incentives and bonuses and put it where they saw that they needed it most. Now, you still have a national list, right? There's still a list out there of these AFSCs that, you know, nationwide we want to retain and incentivize. But we also recognize that, you know, keeping an F-22 crew chief, while important here at the 192nd, isn't important in the Maryland Guard because they don't have F-22s, right? So you've got to be able to move and be agile enough and effective enough, though, so a wing commander and a wing command chief have access to tools. Some of the other things that we're working on, and I believe we've cracked the nut on these, are giving technicians reenlistment bonuses. When I was a technician, I used to watch, I had 13 drill status guardsmen who were getting $20,000 bonuses, and I certainly didn't get one. And then I always scratched in my head, and the answer was, well, you've got a full-time job. And I was like, well, maybe I ought to leave and take a $20,000 bonus. And that's not what we want. So we're trying to ask, and this is a congressional ask, to get flexibility to give commanders the opportunity, right, to maybe incentivize some technician positions and some AGRs and drill status guardsmen, depending on what he or she have in terms of a need. Because again, my job, General Rice's job, is not to dictate policy. Our job is to give tools to commanders and command chiefs to be able to affect readiness in the most positive way they can. Move policy and law out of the way and give you tools and resources to be effective. And I think we've got a pretty good track record. Colonel Piper could tell you whether that's true or not, but I believe we do. And there are some things that we're working on to make that even better. And my hope is that in this next National Defense Authorization Act, you'll actually see some of those come to fruition, because I've gotten promises from, or I've gotten, I can't say promises, I've gotten positive comms from our congressional members, because I do spend time on Capitol Hill. And those folks have promised that they're going to work on it. Not a promise to give me the money, but promise that they'll work on it and it'll be a priority for them. And that's important. So good question. And there's more to come on that as well.
Thank you so
Chief,
much.
it's Colonel Piper. I will say it is true. You have done a great job just providing tools to me and to Chief Amburn just for getting after problems. So just that general approach of providing us tools is effective and appreciated. Thank you.
Awesome. And that's great feedback, sir. Right? Because I always wonder, you know, when we do things and we kind of mess with the rheostat at the headquarters level, at the Pentagon level, is it really affecting positive change at the wing? And then that's great feedback to hear, because, you know, we often wonder. The truth of the matter is that, right, as leadership, sometimes these decisions that we make may not really have positive or negative effects for years, right? I'll be at the retirement home when somebody makes a decision whether or not I was a good command chief or not. But you just have to have trust and faith in your airmen and what's important to them, and rely on your experience. So good feedback, sir. Thanks for that. And we're not done yet.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Chief. That's the power of empowerment that you and I both believe in.
Yes, sir. 100%.
All right, Chief Anderson, we have one last question that we're going to ask you here today. Any other questions we're still going to take live, and we will send them to your staff at a later point. But your last question for today comes from Facebook, and this person says, I would love to know at a high level how we stand by the people in uniform to show them we are behind them and we do protect the people no matter what happens, whether it's war, virus, or race.
Yeah, I'm not sure I understand the question. When we say we stand by the people, we're talking the community or our airmen?
From what I can gather in this question, I think they're talking about that we protect the people, as in civilians in our country.
Okay, yeah, and that's the perfect question to ask, right? And that's that kind of gets to something we talked about a little bit before. Here's the truth, right? And this is something that's not better or worse than our active duty or our reserves or anybody else. The truth is, our Air National Guard, one of our strengths is we are family, and we are our communities. You know, if you take into consideration that 75% of us are drill status guardsmen and live in those communities and that live and breathe where these things happen every day, you have to think through that and recognize that that's our strength. So when we send, for instance, our defenders downrange, they're not going out there on behalf of the president. They're going out there on behalf of their communities to protect the communities and be liaisons and be the face of everything that is good, to empower folks to feel the ability to express themselves in a peaceful assembly. That's really all we're asking, is the constitutional rights of every airman out there, every person, every member of our communities and our nation should feel the right to peaceful assembly. And our job is to allow that to happen. And when our nation needs us to do that, The best thing I can tell you is do exactly what you have been doing. If you've paid attention to the news, there's been videos out there, there's been, all kinds, it's on Reddit, where you've got soldiers and airmen standing out there protecting the lives of others and getting things yelled at them, thrown at them. And our airmen and our soldiers have performed admirably, better than I could ever imagine, because the truth of the matter is it could have gone a different way. I've watched, young soldiers and young airmen standing in line with shields, put their shields down and take a knee to offer the opportunity of dialogue with the community. I saw this morning, I was watching, there was a story about that happening where all of that happened to be Army Guard, for instance, on this one, but they all put down their shields and took a knee to facilitate a conversation and not be seen as, the police force who's there to push back the discussion. They were really there as a part of local law enforcement to facilitate an open and honest dialogue. And we've done exactly what we needed to do. And the interesting thing is, and we talked about this at the beginning, I didn't ask you to do that. I didn't train you to do that. It's good leadership, it's good airmanship, and it's just a true desire to take care of our families and our communities. The reason that you joined to begin with, right? To be part of something bigger than yourselves. There was never a doubt in my mind that you would do exactly what you have done and what you will continue to do, whether I'm in the chair or not. The truth of the matter is when we asked to be a part of this Air National Guard family, we do willingly. We know that we will be called. We didn't know it would be called to be out in the streets administering COVID tests and putting ourselves at risk. We didn't know that it would be standing out on the streets with maybe possibly a shield or not to protect our communities. And we certainly weren't prepared for, an 8-hour call up from when the time the phone rang to the time you were on the streets. And I offer to you that it just goes to the resiliency, the professionalism, and what is so very, very great about our Air National Guard. And that's every single one of you. So as we start to wrap this up, I think the best thing I can offer to you is tell your story. When you're out and you happen to be in uniform and you're pumping gas and somebody's looking at you, let them know what the Air National Guard is, and remind them that you're a part of the community. Let them remind them that, there are 3 things that we do in the National Guard. First, we build partners. We build partnerships, whether it's with countries or nations or our communities. Of course, we do the downrange fight. We keep the wolves at bay with F-22s or pick a platform or cyber or space. And the other thing that we do is we support our governors and our adjutant generals when it comes to domestic operations, and whether that's domestic disturbance or a COVID fight or a hurricane or a tornado. And we have demonstrated that entire wheel. We have demonstrated that just in the last couple of months, and you certainly have done it at the 192nd. So again, on behalf of General Rice and I am so absolutely honored to spend this time with you today, and just let you know very simply, I'll end like I started. Thank you. Thank you for what you do every day. Thank you for being a part of this Air National Guard family. And I am truly humbled for the last 4 years to be our Air National Guard Command Chief. And I leave this job in the next month, or I don't know, maybe 2, we'll see, extremely optimistic about our future. It would be extremely easy to be less than optimistic given our circumstance right now in our society and in our nation. But I will tell you the absolute opposite is true. I have watched our airmen and I've watched our societies grow and change and evolve. And I've watched our airmen engaged in conversation in a way that is absolutely amazing. So thank you for what you do every day. Thanks for being a part of our family. And like I said, to Colonel Piper and the entire leadership team, Chief Amburn and everybody else, thank you for the opportunity to engage today. I look forward to the rest of your questions. And as I said earlier, I'll make sure my team brings those around and we'll get you his answers as fast as we can. So thanks again.
Chief, thank you so much for answering our questions live and just recognizing our airmen here today. This is over to you, Chief Amburn, for closing remarks.
Hey, Chief, brother. First and foremost, thank you so much, man. I know how busy your schedule is, and for you to take majority of your day yesterday and then some time today with our airmen is awesome. And thanks for all the great information and updates. And so on behalf of the 1,285 airmen here in the Virginia Air National Guard, I don't know if you can see it, probably not because my background is blocking it out with that big raptor there. But we've got a very cool litho for you here, Chief. It's got the mighty F-22 Raptor on it. It's got the 192nd Wing tail flash and the 149th Fighter Squadron here at the 192nd Wing at Langley, Virginia. And we're going to send that to you, get some of our airmen to sign it. And I've been watching you, Chief, the whole time you talk. I think if you take that F-16 that's behind your left ear and just kind of slide it to the right just a little bit, that F-22 will fit perfect right there.
Yeah, we'll put it right there.
There you go. And Chief, I also just want to say publicly to you, thank you for being a great friend and a great mentor. And I got to tell you, brother, 2 years ago, when I found out I was selected for this job, I seen you in the hallway at the Readiness Center, and we kind of hugged each other, and you told me, I'll never forget it. You said, man, you're walking into the best job of your life. And you were so right. And what makes this job the best job of my life is the 1,285 airmen that you got to spend time with and that you heard about today. They're great accomplishments. So thanks, brother. I appreciate you, man.
Yeah. Thanks, Chief. Thanks for your time. Thanks for the plaque. I look forward to getting it, and I'll find a place of honor to put it up on my wall. So again, thanks to everybody and your entire team. I appreciate what you do every day. And again, thanks for being a part of my family, this Air National Guard family. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Chief Amburn. Thank you, Chief Anderson, for virtually visiting the 192nd Wing. Everyone viewing, we appreciate you tuning in to this groundbreaking event. If you know someone who missed it, the playback will be posted to this page and to the 192nd Wing's YouTube page. Thanks again for watching. Take care.
Take care, y'all. Thanks very much.